Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Former President Donald Trump surrendering to federal authorities in Miami, Florida today to face charges for retaining and mishandling classified documents, including top-secret information about U.S. nuclear weapons. In recent days, Trump and many of his supporters have condemned the charges using inflammatory language. Ahead of Trump's arraignment, Miami Police Chief Manny Morales said law enforcement officials are preparing for the possibility of violence by far-right extremists outside Miami's federal courthouse.
Make no mistake about it, we're taking this event extremely serious. We know that there is a potential of things taking a turn for the worst, but that's not the Miami way.
Trump, who's currently the front-runner for the Republican Party's 2024 presidential nominations, planning to fly to his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, after his Florida arraignment to deliver remarks this evening. After headlines, we'll have the latest on the federal indictment against Trump. We'll speak with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, expert on fascism and authoritarianism. In Ukraine, at least 10 people were killed, more than 24 injured overnight as Russia launched a massive missile attack on the central city of Kiev. Victims included residents of a partially collapsed 5-story apartment building where rescue crews said people could still be trapped under rubble. Ukraine's military, meanwhile, says it's retaken 7 settlements in the Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions in a counteroffensive over the past week. NATO's opened its largest-ever aerial war games in Germany. The military alliance says some 10,000 personnel from 25 countries are taking part in drills involving 250 warplanes. Non-NATO nations, Japan and Sweden, are participating. The war games opened as French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Polish President Duda to Paris, where the three discussed aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg delayed Monday's planned visit with President Joe Biden by a day after Biden had emergency surgery, root canal. On Saturday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made a surprise visit to Kiev, where he met President Volodymyr Zelensky and addressed Ukraine's parliament. Trudeau pledged $500 million in new military aid and said he would support Ukraine's bid to join NATO during the alliance's July summit in Vilnius, Lithuania.
Canada and many others are very supportive of Ukraine joining NATO when the conditions allow. What that exactly looks like is a conversation that we're continuing to have between now and Vilnius, but I'm very positive about it.
The world's nuclear powers spent nearly $44 billion on weapons of mass destruction last year, or more than $157,000 per minute, with the United States accounting for more nuclear weapons spending than all other nations combined. That's the finding of a new report by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. The Nobel Peace Prize-winning group found worldwide spending on nuclear weapons rose last year for the 3rd consecutive year. Iran's supreme leader has said he's open to reviving the landmark 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which the U.S. unilaterally withdrew from under President Trump in 2018. On Sunday, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said there was nothing wrong with pursuing a revival of the agreement as long as Iran can keep its nuclear infrastructure intact. Khamenei spoke after touring an exhibition of Iran's nuclear industry in Tehran.
Based upon Islamic ideals, we do not want nuclear weapons. But if this wasn't the case, they would not be able to prevent us from doing so, just like they could not prevent our nuclear progress so far.
Human rights groups warn Iran is executing prisoners at its fastest pace in nearly a decade. Over the weekend, at least 5 prisoners were hanged in Iran. This follows 282 executions carried out in May, nearly double the number recorded during the same time last year. The use of capital punishment in Iran has surged in the months after historic massive protests took to the streets following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody last September. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the UN reports more than 45 people were killed after an attack on a camp for internally displaced communities. The camp, located near a UN peacekeeping site in the Jugu territory, was reportedly infiltrated by fighters of a coalition of armed groups Sunday, who carried out the massacre through the early hours of Monday. The victims were buried in a mass grave. The UN called the attack a serious violation of international humanitarian law. UNESCO says the United States will rejoin the United Nations Cultural and Scientific Agency and will pay more than $600 million in back dues. In 2017, the Trump administration announced it would withdraw the U.S. from UNESCO, citing what it called anti-Israel bias. Israel followed suit immediately after. Both the U.S. and Israel stopped paying member dues in 2011 after Palestine joined UNESCO. In climate news, tens of thousands of dead fish have washed ashore across multiple beaches along the Texas Gulf Coast after they were starved of oxygen due to abnormally warm ocean temperatures. In 2019, the UN warned the climate crisis will increasingly lead to massive die-offs of marine life as warm water holds far less oxygen than colder water. This comes as more than 430 wildfires continue to burn across Canada, with thousands of people in Alberta, British Columbia, and Quebec still under evacuation orders. Quebec's Minister of Public Security said the blazes will likely last all summer, with more air quality alerts likely across the northern U.S. and Canada. Last Wednesday, as thick, dark smoke from Canada's fires blanketed New York City. Over 300 people were seen at hospitals due to symptoms of asthma, nearly double the number seen the day before the smoke arrived. The highest rate of emergencies were reported in predominantly low-income Black and Latinx neighborhoods. In Montana, a landmark climate trial led by 16 children and young adults began Monday in the capital, Helena. The lawsuit, which is the first of its kind to go to trial in the U.S., was filed in 2020 by plaintiffs between the ages of 5 and 22. They accuse the state of Montana of violating their constitutional rights as it pushed pro-fossil fuel policies that devastated the environment and severely impacted their health. This is Julia Olson, executive director of Our Children's Trust, the nonprofit law firm representing the young plaintiffs.
Children need lawyers and they need advocates because our system of law does not prioritize the needs of the youngest among us. And when it comes to climate crisis, human laws are not paying attention to the laws of nature and what scientists say is necessary to protect our children and all future generations.
Earlier this month, a judge cleared the way for a children's climate case against the United States government to begin in a federal court in Oregon after Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts blocked the lawsuit in 2018. J.P. Morgan Chase has agreed to pay $290 million to settle a lawsuit brought by survivors of convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, who said the bank ignored warnings about Epstein's sexual abuses for years because he was bringing in wealthy clients. J.P. Morgan Chase still faces a separate lawsuit brought by the U.S. Virgin Islands, where the Attorney General's office said in a statement it'll proceed with its enforcement action to, quote, prevent the bank from assisting and profiting from human trafficking in the future, unquote. And in Pennsylvania, authorities have recovered the body of a tanker truck driver who died after he lost control of his rig and crashed Sunday morning, triggering a fire that collapsed an overpass on Interstate 95 in Philadelphia. The disaster has halted traffic in both directions along the main East Coast artery connecting Florida to Maine. On Monday, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said officials would have a timeline for its reconstruction once engineers complete a review in the coming days.
With regards to the complete rebuild of I-95 roadway, we expect that to take some number of months.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.